Hi everyone, my name's Elena Miller-ter Kuile, and I am from the San Luis Valley, so about two and a half hours north of here. High, 8,000 feet, dry desert, but it's a beautiful place to live. And I see actually there are some people here from the valley, so that's exciting. So, bienvenidos a Cactus Hill Farm. Buenos dias, good morning. And I'll just be talking a little bit about our operation and also just kind of the model I've been using to try to stay competitive in a tough business. So this is a little bit about myself. I already introduced myself, but I studied at Cornell University. I did my research on terra preta soils, which if you don't know what they are, look them up because it's an awesome inspiration of how humans can shape our ecosystem and really improve something. So I think it's an awesome model, and it gave me a lot of hope. I'm a mutt, so my family, I have a little bit of everything, but Chicano mostly, and Dutch is I think the most important thing up here on the slide too is being a single mom. This model is something that I've been really I want to be home with my kids, I want to be present, and I've noticed I get an off-farm job and then everything just falls apart. So really trying to do this on my own and not have that supplementary income coming in from another job. And I think this is the theme of my presentation is where our focus is, and there's this great quote, and it says, "I want to be a better ancestor than a descendant." In other words, where's our focus? Is our focus today now trying to get by, or are we looking to the future? This is my daughters, my beautiful daughters, and this is the 7th generation that's going to be on our farm. So I think that's really, really touching, the concept the Iroquois have of the 7th generation, and really looking at, like, what are we trying to do for them? And I would just say right now, and maybe I'm just in a place, but I don't think we're doing enough. I think we can do more. I would like to acknowledge the land acknowledgement. Oh, I just realized there's right there is my slides, so I don't have to be awkwardly. Woo! Okay. So I would like to do a quick land acknowledgement. The Southern Ute, the Apache, Arapaho, and Cheyenne, Comanche, Kiowa, and Navajo tribes all lived in the San Luis Valley and on our land. I'd also like to acknowledge something that I've struggled with is we do have some Pueblo Indian ancestry, but that is something that Hispano people do not talk much about. So a little bit of the history of the farm. There was a little bit of mention of the colonial past of this area. My family did come with the conquistadors and slowly moved up north. And I always say we didn't cross the border crossed us because we were Spanish citizens and Mexican citizens and then Americans and never even moved. So, and basically 1850s, 1860s was when my family came up into Colorado, southern Colorado, when it was still part of Mexico as part of the land grants that were given by the Mexican government. So a little bit about the farm. I think there's major challenges. I'm 6th generation farmer on our farm, and there are huge challenges on trying to keep a farm and a family, and I think especially looking at young farmers coming into the business, I know there's huge challenges in stepping into a new business and not having that generational farm, but I think there's definitely that movement towards big ag, and so how do you stay small and still stay competitive? I think me and my dad are always fighting because he's kind of a farmer and I'm kind of a rancher, and it's hard to put those two together on the same land. I think one thing that I think about a lot is water issues. I mean, we only get 7 inches of rainfall a year in our valley, and we are really struggling. The historical water rights, which we have been really damaged through pumping and also through land use changes and also through water right changes. And so I think that's really something I think a lot about, and that's why the sheep business was really appealing to me, is that idea of I can reduce my water use and still be able to produce a product. We have some major problems. We have a mining disaster on our river that has really damaged our water quality. And I think looking forward, climate change and environmental issues are going to be the new challenges of ag. So what do I do and what do we do on our farm? We have about 400 acres. Most of it is not productive, so it's really only about 200 of productive acreage that we use a historic water right and a acequia water right to irrigate. We have some center pivots and flood irrigation. I kind of fluctuate. I downsized recently because I have my small children, but I go from 200 to 300 ewes, so it just depends, and also the year, the drought, all these sorts of things are things I look at when I decide how many sheep I keep. The products we create on our farm, we do specialty wool. I also do grass-fed meat right now, mostly focusing on half and whole animals, but I'm hoping to go into cuts soon. And then I would add that sheep have another product that we don't talk a lot about, and that is their manure. The regenerative properties of manure are huge. And so that's really something that I'm really excited about, is seeing those soil improvements on our farm, which we are seeing. Where do we sell? Direct sales, farmers markets sometimes, if my kids will let me, fiber shows, and also I do a lot of online sales. So I thought, since a lot of people are producers, I would kind of break down like the model that I'm using as far as how my goal is to make every animal produce as much as possible. And that way I can stay small and I don't have to have 1,000 head to stay competitive. And I think this model works on a farm my size, but it also could be scaled up or scaled down, because I know people are scaling it down into smaller bunches. So I'm focusing on retail value wool. I do this on my website, and then I also do it in-person sales. So the first product that I love to sell, because it's like me and my laziness, is raw fleece. And actually there is a market for this, but they have to be premium quality. And so I've kind of had to like learn how to judge fleeces, look at quality, and then also choose animals. I think breeding is super huge on that. And so on the, let's see, for you, upper left, maybe? Those are some of my raw fleeces, and basically like different colors. That's kind of my specialty, is the natural colors. And then I kind of break it down price-wise. So that's about $2 to $35 a pound for fleece, and you figure about $7 about per animal. That's the average. And then I go to the next step, which has been cleaned, carded, picked, and it's ready to be spun or made into felt or some other product. And that, you have to look at processing, but that I take home about $34 a pound. I also do bulky yarn, and you can see each type of yarn. So if people who are maybe not from the fiber world, bulky yarn is like what it sounds like, fat yarn. And then worsted is kind of like the next step. Fingering is much finer. So kind of as you go down that value chain, you can improve and increase the value of each fleece. And then the other thing that I do is when I work with butchers, and I go to the butcher and I pick up a raw fleece and I send it to get done into a pelt. And those are actually a really great way. And so what I try to do is make each animal, sheep are kind of known for like, oh, they're not worth a lot of money. But if you can make, I don't know, maybe on the high end, $600 on a fleece, and then you have a pelt that's worth like $400, and then you have maybe 2 to 3 lambs, that's the goal, you want singles or triplets, then you're looking at like each animal being able to produce it's gonna be a range depending on what you're doing, but maybe $500 to $1,000 a year. So that's my goal, is to try to keep each animal producing as much as it can. These are estimated costs. My mill was explained me this very complicated thing, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna put some numbers down and just talk to people, because every mill is gonna have different pricing, and then the products that are being created are gonna be different. And I think it's really cool because you have so many options. There's so many things that you can be making out of wool, and so, this is just what I do, but there's way more out there. So what I did is I took an old shed that was falling down on my place, and I basically turned it into a fiber studio for myself. That's my little daughter helping me. I didn't take a picture of the whole thing because it's always a mess. This is a little bit of my product, or my process. So I get raw, in the corner you see the raw skeins, and then right now I'm using citric acid dyes and plant dyes to make different colors. And then on the far right, right, is one of me at one of my wool shows. I make everything myself. Everything's DIY. So I think my big question, right now my clients are mostly people who are fiber artists, obviously, that are already in this world. But I would argue that this conversation needs to be happening with all of us. So what does what you wear represent what you stand for? In other words, what do you put on every day? And how can we use the wisdom from the past to solve our current crisis? So I think that, looking at our culture around textiles, there was a time where each yard of fabric took time and investment, and so people used it and reused it. We're in an age now where people are, buying cheap shirts. I see these advertisements for $3 shirts. They're made out of polyester. It's plastic. And then the rate of that we are buying these products is increasing as well. So it's a really scary time, especially when you look at the huge impact of textiles on the environment. And I thought I had, oh, how do I go back? Okay, I'm like missing one. I'm sorry, where is it? Okay, well, there was a slide in here, but somehow it got deleted, about the cost of fast fashion and how basically 20% of water waste is coming from our textile industry. And I think this is something Jeannie is going to talk a lot more about how, how we make clothes also should be on the conversation. And I'm like a yes and person. We're talking about local foods. That's wonderful, and I definitely think we should be doing that. But I also think we should be talking about, fiber and what we wear. So, anyway, yeah, I don't know where that slide is. That's kind of embarrassing. No surprises there. This is me on social media. I'm at Cactus Hill Farm. This is also my website if you want to check me out. And the two processors that I did want to give a shout out to are Yampa Valley Fiber Works in Craig, Colorado, and then the Driftless Tannery in Argyle, Wisconsin, and they do most of my processing. There are other companies, of course, but these are the two that I recommend. Oh, wow. Okay, they're just out of order. Okay, well, good. Thank goodness, because I was like, well, it's kind of missing an important part. Oh, anyway, so I think focusing on water, we've been actually able to, our soils start out with very little organic matter, and we see huge improvement. So we have one field that we've done no-till and then the grazing on, and it's 1% organic matter is what we're starting out with, and we're already at 3.6. So I'm really hopeful that if I keep this model that I can help regenerate our farm. We have basically no soil is what I would describe it as. We have gravel bars and dirt. It doesn't have organic matter or what you would call soil. So I did want to talk about, the importance of this in our alpine area. Also, just some quick statistics just to kind of give you an idea of the problem. 713 gallons of water into one t-shirt. And think about how we treat a t-shirt, right? Oh, we're going to go to the track team. We're going to get t-shirts. They're not treated like these valued objects. They're treated like a disposable object. And I think also arguing with our supply chain. Right now we have wool grown in the United States, shipped to China, then shipped back to the US. It is a very complicated and not very sound environmentally process. And I also think, looking at CO2 emissions, polyester is literally plastic, so we are wearing plastic a lot. And I think I would like to also bring in the conversation about culture. Every culture in the world had its fiber traditions, and as we've industrialized and as we've commercialized, we've used fashion, we've used clothing as a way to colonize, and now the modern neocolonialism to change cultures. So I think that is really relevant to everybody, and I also think that, if we look at identity, these things are really important conversations. Okay, I don't know how that ended up out of order, but these are my sources, and I intended to have I kind of changed my plan, but I intended to kind of just allow for questions if people have them. That way maybe I can get to people's interests a little bit more focused.
Can you hear me? We're gonna do questions with you and Jeannie after Jeannie speaks, if that's all right with you. Cool.
Okay,
so if you all can
even
be
better.
Patient, yeah, we'll get them both back on stage afterwards, after Jeannie speaks.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, and I just want to add one more thing. How does what you wear represent what you stand for and who you are? I'm going for the Zapatista, I'm pretty sure it's going to come back. No, but this fabric is actually hand woven in Guatemala, and this is a 60-year-old dress to show you how long things can last if they're made with quality and really done with that ecosystem mentality. So.
Thank you, Elena. We'll get Jeannie to come up on stage, and then we'll bring you back up for Q&A afterwards.
Okay,
cool.
Thank you.
Please welcome Jeannie to the stage.
Woo!
Okay, does someone need to show me how to use this? The big green button on top. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'm really honored to be here. I also want to thank the speakers ahead of me for the beautiful and honest opening. What a great way to start. And Elena for her energy and youth. I don't know how she's doing. I've been watching her shuttle her 2 kids around in the motel and get here on time, so good job. I'm going to follow a script because I'm not as good as I once was. Have you ever heard that country song? So if I ad lib, I get into deep trouble. But I want to say that I had no idea when I began my textile journey in 1999 that it would take me back in our collective history and simultaneously propel me into a future I could not have imagined. It would become this journey in direct marketing, and I know I'm kind of focused on wool today because that's kind of what I've been asked to do, but it's equally meat because it's all converted protein, right? Sunlight energy to protein. But this journey of direct marketing would become a vehicle that would connect me to the timeless traditions and skills of making textiles, take me to their very roots, just like in food, teach me and deepen not only my agricultural experience, but my entire life perspective. This journey of taking our harvest to market opened windows through which I gained clarity on things I had never even thought about, bringing important and unforgettable people into my life. It built meaningful connections that truly erased the urban-rural divide in our life, and even bonded this Western girl to folks in the East in a way I'd never been nor would have been otherwise. I saw for the first time, really, truly, they became visible, the people who convert our fibers to yarns and cloth. I saw them for the first time, both locally around me as I hired them, as I progressed in my journey, to those around the country that still remain in our U.S. textile industry, how powerfully important their work is, work I hadn't even known about. It brought me to view our own work in agriculture with even deeper purpose. As I shepherded our wool along its transformational journey from sunlight to grass, bitten by sheep, and converted from plant protein to wool and meat protein, and on to yarn and cloth and finished pieces, I formed important relationships with every person that touched it, including those who marketed it and those who bought the products. We needed each other in a way I'd never known. We learned from each other, and our lives became enriched. I've had designers that have spent their careers in fashion tell me in their offices in New York, Jeannie, you're the only farmer or rancher we've ever spoken to. Imagine spending a life and a career of fibers and fashion and textiles and never known the people who bring the fiber to you. The theme of this conference, which is Microbes, Markets, and Climate, is like the exact path we've followed for the past 35 years. It's been a logical and sequential journey. First, we were focused on the stewardship of natural resources, as many of you in this room, or most of us in this room. And then we adapted to changing, challenging, or loss of markets, converting our harvest to products and taking them direct to market ourselves in order to survive. And we attached our products to their origin story, the heritage, the culture, and the stewardship, their provenance, equally important in fiber as to the food. And then finally, we've responded to the increasing concerns in both the food and fashion sector on the ecosystem and climate impacts of our ranching operations where we produce today's food, clothing, and shelter. I realize that I'll be telling your story as I tell this story, but really for me, I'm on the Imperial Stock Ranch in north central Oregon. It's high desert, less than 8 inches of rain a year. We used to say we got 8 to 10 inches, but we haven't seen 8 inches in 5 or 6 years. It was established as a homestead claim in 1871. By 1900, it had become Oregon's largest individually owned land and livestock holding. We still operate out of the historic headquarters, all the buildings and facilities built before industrialization, our round pen for breaking and training all the horses that did the work. It's an amazing place, and You can't live there or where you live and touch this land every day and not be aware of all those before us, or recognize that we're temporary. We're temporary stewards and that the land was here before us and it'll be here when we're gone. We're aware of both our significance, our importance, and our insignificance, and that the land is a sustenance for all of us. My husband's goal was always to see the land win. Anyone who ever talked to him would have heard that. He knew that the health of natural resources meant you would have a healthier harvest and a healthier bottom line, and that was our hope for the future, not just our family, our local community, but our collective future. Working with our agency partners by 1989, we had written a total conservation management plan for our entire operation with the health of natural resources as the focus. And then we began implementation of a host of changes. Those included off-stream water developments and grazing management, a lot of infrastructure built, conversion to no-till on 4,000 acres of dryland cropland, and a host of things you would all be familiar with. 2 creeks are born on our ranch, Wood Gulch and Buck Hollow. And in 1990, when we were beginning this implementing of this total conservation mindset, our Fish and Wildlife partners told us that only 2 salmon had returned to Buck Hollow Creek to spawn. What a wake-up call. We have the first 15 miles of Buck Hollow Creek. It was the impetus for us, all the landowners in the basin and our agencies, to come together to collectively work on this issue of restoring health to the entire basin. And it was the Buck Hollow Watershed Project that was born. It was collaborative, comprehensive, and it was a basin-wide approach to restoration. We hoped we would see a difference in our lifetime, but we didn't know if it would happen that fast. We actually began to see changes within year 1, and within 20 years, we had growing and record numbers of salmon returning to spawn. This was our work. This is what we all are here talking about. This is what we knew. This was our focus. It was our life. And then 1999 happened. Oh, I must have missed something. Well, there's Wood Gulch, and it's a big tributary to Buck Hollow. I'm going to move it on. 1999 happened. As you know, in agriculture, we typically sell harvests as commodities. For 100 years, we had sold our wool to the same company. It's all we knew. After shearing in the spring, we called our wool buyer, worked for that company, and said, "What's the price this year? What will we get for the wool?" And he said, "I'm sorry, folks, we're not buying. We're closing our processing and going offshore like everybody else." It's the day that offshoring arrived on our doorstep with no warning. It was also a time when tens of thousands of sheep producers in the United States were going out of the sheep business. That call profoundly changed our lives. And my husband said, "Find a new way or the sheep will be gone." From that day forward, I took us from ranch to retail in our own branded products. Yarns, eventually apparel, home fashions, and production yarns. I built relationships. I knew nothing. I built relationships with those who could take my greasy wool through to a finished product. And eventually with stores and with brands, some of whom are influential and known around the world. And in parallel, I was doing the same thing with the lamb, okay? It was an amazing journey, and it changed our life. It's also a lot of work, but we've learned a lot of lessons. I didn't know anything about any of this process, but what I also didn't know is that I couldn't do it. So I think you take a step and you carry on. It didn't happen overnight. Eventually, I had 20 fiber artisans within 100 miles of me employed, working from home, converting and building product, and I was marketing it and just pulling it through. And I was building that business while I was driving the meat delivery truck and dropping lamb and beef at restaurants throughout Central Oregon. I built the 2 businesses in parallel. The success of our wool journey took the support of all these people. It was built on pairing the wool with our heritage and our agricultural practices, which we have been now implementing for decades. I was telling the sunlight story everywhere. of grazing animals and the gifts of creation and how we're called to honor it, and the role sheep have played in humankind's history for so long. The provenance of the wool was critical to the effort in the yarns, in home fashions, and apparel. We used every part of the harvest and then added value to the waste created at each step in the process of making finished goods. Our story was the motivation for a book published by Bloomsbury Publishing of London in 2021. It's called Stories of Fashion, Textiles, and Place. See, I used to tell Dan, my husband, who unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, I used to say, Dan, if only someone would drive down this dirt road and see who we are and what we're doing and why it matters, it could make all the difference. Who is going to listen, truly listen to this ranch wife from the middle of nowhere? They used to call me the wool lady because I was telling my story all the time. I preferred it when someone referred to me once as the lamb babe. I thought that was a lot better. You can be the lamb babe now. I'm a little over the hill. But that happened. After 13 years of hard work, we got a call from Ralph Lauren during the 2012 London Olympics. There was an uproar all of a sudden over the fact that why is our own U.S. team wearing uniforms made in China? I mean, that's no slam to any other culture. But why can we not make this for our own team? And so they called. The Olympics were still going on. We were in harvest. We'd come in for lunch. And I took the phone call, and I sold my heart out. And I thought, well, that'll never happen. That's never going to happen, right? But 6 months later, I did get the order for what became the biggest yarn order of my life at that point. And it became the Team USA uniforms for the Winter Olympics in 2014 in Sochi, Russia. And more than that, they told our story. This was the influencer that we needed to tell what we were doing and why it mattered. And the brands kept calling. They increased our credibility. You see, because it's already been mentioned earlier in our history, we were all part, all of us, of local, regional supply chains for food, clothing, and shelter. But as we evolve to where we are today, with predominantly global supply chains, we've lost more than we ever imagined, and certainly more than anyone ever forecasted. Our systems are broken, and it has contributed to the disconnect between products and the place where they come from, the processes of how they become a product, and the people with the skills and the cultures who can convert those fibers to products. We've diminished the importance of place and the motivation for stewardship that connection to place inspires. We're left with anonymity, which contributes to devaluing products, which is the race to the bottom on price, and it breeds distrust in the marketplace. The greatest result, I think, from this global shift has been the degradation of our resources and the resulting negative climate impacts, along with the loss of skills and the damage to cultures around the globe. We saw tremendous growth in our fiber journey, my textile journey between 2005 and 15, especially after the 14 Olympics. Many brands were calling, and the next call that would change our life was the call from Patagonia in 2015, who asked us to be third-party audited for our land and animal practices. This is because they'd all of a sudden had a fiasco in their supply chain in South America where there was photography of animal abuse in their fiber supply. Patagonia was part of an international working group organized by a nonprofit called Textile Exchange, headquartered here in the US, who was developing a new global standard for sheep and wool production called the Responsible Wool Standard, the RWS. It followed their work in organic cotton and responsible down. These are third-party programs that come in and look at your practices and check the boxes as opposed to how we used to operate with just our say-so. Well, this is just how we do it, folks. Trust me. We don't live in that culture anymore. With a mission to improve the sustainability of the textile industry as a whole, they focus at the fiber level. because that's where so many ecosystem and climate impacts are capable of being impacted. They developed the RWS over 3 to 4 years with a broad group of stakeholders from around the world, producer groups, wool growers in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, South America, nonprofits, the Nature Conservancy, animal rights groups, Four Paws, supply chain, and brands. Huge, the companies who buy our harvest. That's who brought this standard. You see, the size of the fashion and textile industry is actually staggering if you didn't know the numbers. Fashion and textiles are a $2.4 trillion industry. Automotive is $2.2 trillion, and consumer electronics is $1.2 trillion. But the fashion industry is the most fragmented of all those industries, and is considered the second leading polluting industry in the world. So to make a significant change, it has to begin with transparency and traceability. You'd be amazed at how many brands have no idea. They put their logo on a product, but they package that out of a factory in Asia, mostly, and they have no idea where the fiber came from or the process, who spun the yarn or who wove the fabric or knit it. When the RWS standard launched in 2016, because of Patagonia's request, we'd gotten involved. We took a look at it and said, okay, we have nothing to fear. We already do these things. We became the first ranch in the world actually certified. And I was attending RWS working, yes, and we've been the solo flag of standing to this test of responsibility in the United States. We are the only certified wool group in the US and North America, is my Shaniko Wool group. I was attending, you know, a crowd of people who cares. A crowd of people who cares. I mean, I'm grateful, thank you. Sometimes I feel like alone in my own industry. So see, I was witnessing this growing movement in New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, South America. The major wool-producing countries of the world, they don't even consider us as a wool-producing country anymore. And I wanted American producers like us to remain competitive. We already knew how challenging it was to sell wool and make things in America. And we're either going to lose ground, or this was an opportunity to make us stronger. So I established Shaniko Wool Company in 2018 to scale the supply of American wool that can meet this standard. And I already told you, so as of 2022, last year, we are currently, well, we were also certified to Nativa Regenerative. You can look up, you can Google Nativa Precious Fiber, but we're certified RWS and Nativa Regen. We are currently 10 ranches in the American West. We collectively manage and graze 2.6 million acres, and our ranches are located in Oregon, Nevada, California, Colorado, and Idaho, and we're also grazing in some of Utah and Wyoming. Shaniko Wool is continuing the strong relationships that I had built with my Imperial Stock Ranch wool program within the U.S. textile industry and my husband's legacy with resource stewardship. Pictured here is the Ralph Lauren's 2022 Olympic uniforms in Beijing made with Shaniko wool. And is there any media in the room? You're recording, maybe I better not say. Well, for the very first time next summer, pay close attention to Team USA when they march into the opening ceremonies in Paris. But if they don't name us, we can't talk about it. So we've talked about microbes, but I had to go really fast. I didn't get into the stewardship, the conservation, and just the management of natural resources. We didn't dive into that. I didn't with you today. I simply mentioned it. And then we talked about markets. How are you going to survive when your markets go away due to globalization? And how do you give more value to your harvest? So we took that challenge on. And now we go to climate. In the winter of 2019, I was directly challenged by a fashion brand who said to me straight out, this individual in design from the cubicle and the high rise in the city. So do you guys destroy the land in raising grazing animals, livestock? Do you destroy the land and just put methane in the atmosphere? It cuts you deep. You know, we had spent decades on this land and generations on these lands. And if you don't think about their care, you will not remain in business. But it was the motivation I needed to respond to this increasing concern on the part of food companies and fashion and textile companies on the impacts of our ranching operations who deliver food, fiber, and shelter. Okay? So I reached out and found, I'm not a scientist. I'm not anything, actually. I'm just a worker bee. And I found a scientist, though, at Oregon State University, Dr. John Talbot. And working with this team of range and soil scientists, we launched a comprehensive research and measurement effort I called the Shaniko Wool Carbon Initiative. Because thus far, we had our observations, all of us, and our observations have validity. We had yield data. There we are, grazing crop residue. That way you don't have to use chemicals or burn, right? Livestock over the fields, mulch it in. We could go on with that topic for a long time. Species counts. Resource agency testimony. And finally, certification to third-party standards in the support of our work. But we had never formally measured or quantified our ecosystem deliverables. I didn't even know if we could. I said, John, but Dr. John said we could. And he said we would establish a measurement model that would meet all challenges. I said, let's do it. So we began on our ranch, and we've moved on out over my entire farm group. The purpose is to determine the ecosystem and climate impacts of each ranching operation with carbon as a key performance indicator plus the collateral benefits. If soil carbon levels are increasing significantly, statistically significantly over time, additional positive benefits include increases in soil organic matter, nutrient availability, water infiltration, holding capacity, systems biodiversity, improved habitats, resilience to weather, disease resistance, and improved livelihoods. We have peer review, scientific review, and third-party verification of our research model, of the sampling protocols, of the data analysis, the findings, and we're providing the feedback to the farmers and ranchers in our group to further our future management. So as an example on credibility, for 1.5 million acres in our certification program, they would have recommended about 140 sampling points to be credible. We laid down 236, and as of this year, we've baselined the entire 2.6 million acres. With 3 years of data, I'm going to share on our family ranch, our desert operation, no irrigation, dry land farming and grazing on about 50 square miles, 32,000 acres. Our net, yes, we have electrical use, equipment, fossil fuels, methane emissions from our cattle and livestock, because we're grain, hay, sheep, and cattle production our entire 152 years, okay, in this high desert. Our net impact is that we are banking 1.86 tons of carbon per acre on our 32,000 acres, which means we've added in each of the last 3 years about 60,000 tons of carbon into our ground. And that means you are the most educated audience I have ever spoken to. Maybe it's because I'm usually talking to some brand in New York City, right? But that's because they need to buy and support our work. So that means that we've drawn down about 218,000 tons of CO2 in each of those last 3 years, and our greenhouse gas emissions are a net negative value. Here's a look at the green bars from left to right, 2020, 2021, 2022, spring measurements of soil organic carbon, and the brown are the fall measures, except we don't have the updated slide, and we haven't finished our 2023 data analysis. So we were contacted by, we were contacted by a carbon company called Agoro Carbon Alliance in February of 2022. And they have been working, wrap it up. Okay, they've been working with us. I just saw you. You've been hiding behind the microphone. I didn't get my 10-minute warning and my 5-minute warning. Okay, they're a voluntary carbon market company. They strengthen our initiative. How? Their oversight and credibility, they bring a framework for investment. They support our farmer livelihood. They support the mission of improved ecosystem health. They have a rigorous MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification, in order to sell quality carbon credits into markets. And they help us accelerate on the ground. So we are, our Agoro registers credits with Vera, the leading carbon registry in the world. And I'll just say that Shaniko Wool's carbon measurement model has been approved for use, and that we have been approved as a project, because we have the scale, 2.6 million acres, to be an approved project to deliver quality carbon credits to the market. Those can be sold as offsets or insets. We prefer insets. That makes the buyers a partner in our agricultural work on the ground. And I have to tell you, this is the greatest work we've ever done. They can now buy our wool harvest. They can purchase an inset. They can become a partner in regenerative agricultural work. They move their own corporation toward their 2030 targets by doing that. This is a win for the land. It's a win for the farmer rancher. We need the carbon company to bring the framework to make it a legitimate market. They're a new partner. They're part of the family. We're in our second year in our Oregon ranch of our 10-year contract for doing exactly what we do, deliver beef, lamb, wool, grain, and hay to market. And now we're delivering a measured, verified ecosystem deliverable. We are ranching in a way that has a net positive impact on nature. That story is not known, it's not told, and it's the greatest work we need to do is verify our greatest deliverable and help turn the impression and the image that agriculture has in the general public. This work makes this possible, and it supports, we're exactly where we need to be. There are 27 laws on the books in Europe and the United States that will crack down on claims in the marketplace for eco-wool, green this, green that. You know, even the use of the term regenerative, how do we know? Our measurement work is ground truthing whether or not our approach and our list of practices is actually delivering the net result we want. I know I'm over time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Jeanne and Elena, if you want to join together up on the stage, we'll do some questions. And Sarah, I think we have a virtual audience question to start with. We have a virtual audience who is live streaming, joining us on a live stream right now.
Welcome, virtual audience. Thank you all for being here also. So coming from our virtual audience, the question is, I'm curious who buys your wool, and I think this is for you, Jeanne. Is Wool and one of the companies? They have an interesting model to reduce how many clothes we need. They encourage women to wear the same dress for 100 days. I did it, and it was amazing how easy it was.
I'm sorry, what's the simple question?
I think the simple question is, who buys your wool? And I think there's an embedded question there, which is, are the companies that are buying it telling your story?
The answer is yes and no. I don't know who's listening. Thank you for the question. Thank you for caring. I do have a list of partners on my website that they can go to and try to find. This is a heavy lift to do this at scale. You know, I spent 16, 17 years taking our ranch's wool through, and I felt like you got to save yourself before you start bringing everybody else. Plus, I learned so many things. So obviously, Ralph Lauren is a customer. There's a young designer, pretty new into this apparel space. Her name is Janessa Leone. You can go to her website. All of her regenerative wool offerings are from Shaniko Wool. I think they might be on my website, but just this week, a company in the Carolinas called Defeat, Defeet. They're an incredible sock-making company, and they have shifted all sourcing to Shaniko Wool. I mean, I could talk for days on this, but typically today, even those who are making some product in America at the commercial level, many of them are importing the fabrics or importing the yarns. We have a really difficult time getting brands to commit stock programs to U.S. fiber and all the way through U.S. manufacturing. So I appreciate Ralph Lauren. They have been coming to us for each of the last Winter Olympics, but I'm still courting them to marry me instead of being a date. You know, like, how about a stock program that goes all the time? Now that makes a difference. It's like selling meat. You get somebody that buys some, you know, here or there, but you want that constant flow because we have landscape needing to be grazed, animals breeding stock, harvesting the calves, the lambs. This is an ongoing thing, and the one thing we collectively need to do is work to keep grazing animals on the land because there is so much emphasis to remove them from the land, and it's not, we're proving in this measurement model that well-managed grazing is actually delivering that positive environmental value. So Defeat, go buy your socks from Defeat, and go to my website, and there's more coming, but if they haven't launched, I can't really reveal it.
Great, thank you. And I actually think that, so I thought that this question was for you, Jeanne. I think it's actually for Elena also, so I'd love for you to answer the question as well. And maybe I'll frame it slightly differently. Who buys?
Oh, it is working.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Honestly, most of my customers are fiber artists, people who want to make their own stuff, but I would say let's make knitting a social movement so anyone can knit, anyone can spin, anyone can knit. They are something that children did in so many cultures, and so I think it's awesome what Jeannie's doing, and then also I would advocate that people, you know, ask where your clothes comes from, and you can make your own even.
Yeah, my home is the knitting community. The fiber artists are amazing. I know there's stories out right now. Farm to Fiber Knits just launched, and they have a big story on my project. So yeah, you find it from your local farmers markets, your local farm stands, and people. We do have, it's like the Amazon of knitting. It's called knitpicks.com. For any of you that are fiber people, during COVID, they had never made an American yarn. They sell yarn like crazy to craft people all over the country. And they had always just sold imported goods, right? With no traceability, no story to it, no culture. And they came to me and said, we'd really like to build an American yarn. And I said, yes. And so their high desert yarns are all Shaniko wool, selling on knit picks with great pattern support if there are knitters in the room. And there's a ton of hand dyers using our blanks and creating their own stories and their own businesses. I love those women doing that, primarily women, but not all women.
Oh, I do also sell to wholesalers, so some other yarn companies do buy fiber from me to make their own lines.
Thank you both so much for answering that question. We're going to take one in the corner over here and then one with me.
Yeah, I'd like to ask both of you this question because I don't hear it addressed, and that is the fact that when you go from bare ground to all the vegetation that you are creating, the soil doesn't get hot, and so it doesn't give off heat. And so we need to think about, beyond carbon, the impact of that cooling process that happens when you grow vegetation on bare ground. Thank you. Wonderful presentation.
That's a great point, and that's why our research model is actually more comprehensive than the actual models that the carbon companies focus on and it's part of that answer is because, so in my third-party standards, we're audited on water, land, bare ground, plant cover, forage, but also we have to have fully written nutrient management plans, integrated pest management plans. Water is an issue that's looked at. Biodiversity is a whole, we have to have a separate biodiversity management plan. It's comprehensive. In the carbon, and in the textile and fashion world, there's a lot of talk about carbon tunnel vision because there are so many other values going on. But carbon is measurable. It's measurable, and therefore you can more easily build a credit and it become a marketable commodity, if you will, something that's measurable, tangible, and you can trade money on it, whereas it's harder to do that with some of these other aspects of total land health.
And I think we try to do willow planting, tree planting to offer that shade, because I do agree with you. And I think that what inspires me sometimes is being in an alpine desert is that we can show a model, and I would argue that that is what people have been doing in these deserts, where actually the irrigation practices, planting crops, is improving soil health, improving what is growing there, because I mean, not to diminish the native varieties, but without management, a lot of stuff does not grow out on these prairies. So I think that that model, you know, what you're bringing up is a really good point, and I hope to see, there's not a lot of studies on it, and there should be more to study, you know, what happens in these arid areas where people are actively managing the resources.
I have a question for both of you as well, and if Zach is still in the room, I perhaps might be also inviting his response to that. I'm really grateful, Jeannie, for you to bring up the voluntary carbon market as something measurable. There is no industry, and agriculture is part of it, that goes without data sciences right now. And bringing together soil and climate as the water, soil, climate, soil, water sponge makes the whole sequestration even possible. Have you used your carbon credits as a collateral for financing something else? And that's where Zach would come in. Any of the ranchers, farmers in the city, in the place, in the country, have considered going into the voluntary carbon market and using that as a secondary revenue flow to then finance something else that is actually again, a collateral to the bank securing, because all of it is based on your soil health of the farm itself. So the short question is, have you used your carbon credits as a collateral for financing something else?
No, we have not. No, we have not. And it's a great topic, great issue. I think you all realize Zach was great today. I loved his examples. We all know that in the United States in particular, well, two things I would say. I'm kind of in a global community with this RWS work and so on. I am so grateful for the support we do have in the United States, our agency, NRCS, our USDA, Departments of Ag, FSA, Soil and Water Districts, universities, our university land grant colleges and extension services. We have a lot of benefits. But we also know how tough it is. We know what's happened with labor costs, seed, fuel, and when we turn around to sell our harvest, it is very difficult to get, I know we've got meat people in here. I know we've got the Grass-Fed Association. You try to make up our increasing costs when we sell it, and nobody wants to do that. We're not keeping up in selling the harvest with the rate of our cost increases, which is why we're aging out as an industry, and our suicide rate is 2 to 3 times higher in farmers and ranchers in the United States than the general population. So I guess I got off topic. The answer is no, we have not leveraged that. And also, I have personally invested in this research and measurement. I have not had a grant. I wish I had had a grant, but I did not. And but I've done it because it's the greatest work I've ever done, and it's exactly where we need to go. And I can't wait around for somebody to come help me. Sometimes you just got to get it done. So my goal today, every rancher in my group is going to get a new income stream.
So we don't do our carbon credits or anything like that, but I will just say that we have benefited, and I think this is something that ranchers can do through NRCS programs to try to basically work with the programs we're already doing with soil health, and also with we did a river restoration project. We have our farm in a conservation easement. And so I would say we're not directly doing like carbon trading exactly, but we are looking at how are we managing our resources and how do we get incentives for doing the good work that we're already doing. And actually, I just have to say very quickly, a wonderful story is that, you know, we talked about inheritance issues on our farm. My grandmother deeded the farm half and half to my dad and my uncle, and we were really in trouble because we had to buy him out. And so what we did was we put a conservation easement on our farm, and we were able to use the money we got from the Rio Grande Headwaters Land Trust to basically buy my uncle. So it was a wonderful win-win because we put the farm, forever will be a farm, it's in a conservation easement forever, and we got to see it go into the next generation debt-free. So that was really important. So I would say indirectly, yeah.
This is a question for the both of you. Are either of you involved in or aware of processes that are ensuring just labor practices from the beginning to end in the fashion industry, meaning the people that work with the sheep to the people who process the textiles?
Absolutely. The Responsible Wool Standard is the first comprehensive standard that's ever come forward. That it started in 2016, it launched. It was half and half land care, animal welfare. In 2020, they brought in a third module. So there are more than 270 criteria, benchmarks we must meet that they audit us against in land care, animal welfare, or animal husbandry, I should say, that's a better term, and worker. So they audit, it's not such a problem in the United States, but this is a global standard. But yes, pay, working conditions, health and safety, the training programs the workers get. They ask us during audits for proof of pay stubs. I guess in some countries, people don't really get their paycheck. They take advantage of workers and they trade their work for food or housing or something. In the United States, we're also audited. We have so much oversight. Are you right? Department of Labor, everybody. You know, you're going to find it very hard to cheat in the United States on wages. So, but yes, this standard is very comprehensive on worker welfare.
I have a very, very short supply chain. I use 2 processors, maybe 3, and they're all family-owned businesses. I really focus on people that are doing a good job as ranchers, and also, you know, biodegradable soaps and dyes. And the tannery that I mentioned, they use birch, I think, for tanning, so it's natural tanning. Yeah. And so I try to just partner with people that I'm confident. I go to their operation, and I have a very short supply chain. It's just me and some friends. So
to follow up on that, because you just reminded me, the fashion and textile supply chain is very long and convoluted. And so I took us forward under RWS. When Patagonia called, we started forward on it in 15. It launched in 16. We were the first ranch in the world. I was a certified wool supply clear up until 2022. In 2022, the supply chain in the United States began to follow. So now, the first stage, the company that washes the wool and combs it, the spinning mills, dye houses, knitters, weaving, we are now have an entire audited. Every one of those are audited annually for exactly what we're talking about. Worker conditions inside our U.S. textile and manufacturing factories, everybody's checking the boxes.
Anything else? All right. I know there's so many questions, but I'm going to remind all of you that the way that we design this event is that we have roundtables. And I believe both of these beautiful women are going to be at a roundtable today and tomorrow. Great. So we'll have time in the afternoon for you to engage with both of them and ask more questions. Thank you both so much for the work that you do on the land and for being on stage.
I'm only here today, I have to say, because of a funeral. I have to get into Albuquerque tonight, fly out late. I will miss tomorrow's roundtable.
Okay.
But I am here today, this afternoon. Yeah.
Great. Thank you both so much. Thank you all for having so many hands in the air with questions.